A lot to dissect. First, we need to go back in time before the election happened, before we have a new president-elect, Donald Trump. Set the stage for us as it relates to this hush money trial.
Right. So we remember that we had the hush money trial in New York State. And as part of that trial, what happened was the prosecution's theory was that Donald Trump had paid Stormy Daniels with money, and that doing so was a campaign finance violation. And part of the evidence that they had, I think, a small part of it, particularly from Hope Hicks, was that while Donald Trump was in the White House, he made certain comments to her, talked about it with her. And what happened after the fact was that the Supreme Court came back with this immunity ruling and said you can't take things that the president says and use it against him when he was the president if he's acting in an official capacity. And that's a very, very confusing thing. So what you have is in this New York conviction, you have a little bit of evidence that was, you might say, infected or no good or bad. Now Judge Merchan has to decide whether you throw the whole case out for that one reason. And that's what we're expecting today to find out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that detailed breakdown. So a lot to dissect as it relates to this ruling today. Some of the viewers kind of confused this morning, Jeremy, as it relates to what that ruling might look like, because as the hush money trial was going on at the time, President-elect Donald Trump was just campaigning. He was not a sitting president. How does that resonate with the Supreme Court ruling moving forward with Merchan's potential ruling today?
While he was candidate Trump back in 2016, none of these things are barred as far as evidence goes. That's all fair game, and any action that he took, also fair game. It's when he took the oath of office and afterwards that is really sort of what's in question. And this happens, these types of things happen in trial a lot, and that not where somebody gets elected president. That has only happened once in a trial. But what might happen in a trial, for instance, is a judge might allow evidence in that's hearsay or against the rules of evidence or that violates somebody's constitutional rights. And then what the court has to do is they have to say, okay, we're going to look at everything. And we're going to look and do what's called a harm analysis. Did this one piece of evidence or pieces of evidence that should not have come in, did that ruin the whole thing? That's the harm analysis that Judge Merchan is doing. And he's doing it prophylactically because it may be the appellate courts that ultimately throw it out. And Judge Merchan doesn't want to be reversed by them. So he may throw it out on his own. That's what he's looking at.
So let's say that things move in favor of President-elect Donald Trump. Someone has to take the fall, right? Or is the case entirely dismissed and then we just move ahead and look forward to the transition of power?
We would start over. I don't know that the judge would be able to completely dismiss the case based on this, but he would say, okay, Donald Trump, you get a new trial, which puts us sort of in that funky little, okay, well, now what, right? Now he's the sitting president. And in all likelihood, either the case gets dismissed by the prosecutor entirely or it gets abated, paused while he serves his term. Maybe they never get back to it in 2029 or something like that. But if it certainly would be very good news for Donald Trump if this conviction is reversed.
Yeah, and the indictment could be tossed entirely. That is another option, correct?
Potentially. Normally the remedy when you have some evidence that was improper is a new trial. The judge would probably say, well, and there's an issue that's called legal sufficiency, which means the judge has to basically take out that one little point and say, okay, well, first off, did it ruin the jury's take of it? And then if it didn't ruin the jury's take of it, did it follow the law? What was the law in the case? Did the prosecutor's case sufficiently address all of the elements in the case, which I think it did. The only issue here would be whether the statements and any activity that Donald Trump had in the White House, did that sufficiently ruin the entirety of the case? So much of the case was predicated on things that he did before he took the Oval Office and all the money transactions, again, largely before he took the Oval Office. So I don't think he throws the whole thing out. I think he just gives them a start over.
Yeah, so Jeremy, can we also look at the worst case scenario this morning? Because if we look at that, there's also concerns and questions about the sitting Supreme Court, and could President-elect Trump revisit this as president and then change out some of the Supreme Court members and do what he has to do?
Probably you're going to get some new Supreme Court members out of this, regardless, right? Let's remember that typically your Supreme Court justices tend to retire when they go when the getting's good, right? They go and retire when they know that they'll be replaced by somebody from their own party. So you might see if the Republicans are controlling the Senate and the executive branch, you might see a senior member of the court like Clarence Thomas, perhaps Sam Alito might take their they might go and take their retirement at that point, be replaced. So those things could certainly happen regardless of this. But this case probably does eventually make its way to the U.S. Supreme Court as well. It's going to take a long time to get there because it's got to go through all the New York appeals first, and then it could get shifted over to the U.S. Supreme Court. And it might even be after Donald Trump leaves office that it gets that far.
Trial attorney Jeremy Rosenthal, always a pleasure to speak with you on these topics here on Live Now. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we let you go? Anything we need to be keeping a watchful eye for as this event unfolds today?
We'll see what Judge Merchan says. And then on the 26th, if Judge Merchan keeps this conviction in place, on the 26th, we've got sentencing. And again, we're in uncharted territory. Judge has a lot of options at his disposal, which include jail. He could put Donald Trump in jail. In theory, I don't think that happens. He could put Donald Trump on probation and say, basically, look, come back and see me in 2029. He may just affirm this conviction and say, well, go have a nice life. He could do that too. So that's the real key date here. I do think that Judge Merchan is probably going to keep this conviction intact. I'd be surprised if he reverses it. But that's why we do these things, right?
Yeah, and really quickly, Jeremy, that does raise the question. So if that in fact happens, let's look ahead to January, right? Would a sitting president still be able to potentially face these charges?
Yes. However, it's the state of New York that's bringing these charges, not the federal government. The federal government has, you remember, the Department of Justice has the protocol where they say, well, we're not going to prosecute a sitting president. The state of New York is not necessarily bound by that. So Donald Trump's lawyers and their legal team would have to make some sort of argument, potentially on the supremacy clause of the United States, that, look, let's put this off. Let's file what's called a motion to abate, or put this whole thing off until he's out of office. You could see something like that happen. But I think that Judge Merchan can read the room. And I think that he's, in this case, has had a history of sort of being collected about it. I mean, Donald Trump had about 9 or 10 contempt charges, and while most defendants probably get thrown in the slammer over it, Judge Merchan, sort of said, okay, enough. Let's not do this. There's every reason also to think that, just based on Donald Trump's age, based on his service to the country, based on the fact that he's never been in trouble before or convicted before, you would think that a 78-year-old defendant in any of these cases is going to get probation anyway. So there's just really no reason to think that Judge Merchan is going to do something drastic like that, do any type of confinement or jail. If he did, we're certainly in constitutional crisis zone, in which case, you'll need to interview me a lot more.
All right, Jeremy Rosenthal, always a thorough and detailed breakdown of all things related to criminal law. We appreciate you joining us. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.